Though being possibly the most infamous and most wicked murderer in Munich's history, the Johann Eichhorn case is largely unknown. The fact that Eichhorn was Aryan and a member of the Nazi Party may have led to a cover-up of the true facts of his barbaric sexual crimes. Also, a lot of media coverage was prevented by censorship. As a result, the story was virtually unheard of for several decades. He was only caught and his identity revealed in 1939. By this time he had already committed many crimes and was high on the police wanted list as the horror of Western Munich. Johann Eichhorn was born on October 8, 1906 in Orbing, a district of Munich. He was the son of a working-class couple. Until his arrest he worked as a shunter for the Deutsche Reichsbahn in Munich-Leim. It wasn't always easy for Johann in his youth. Outwardly he projected the aura of a popular and charming young man. Inwardly, though, he struggled with an intense and warped sex drive. Although Johann had numerous opportunities to have consensual sexual relations with women, in his own words, "I couldn't do anything without violence," he wrote. Watching women and girls became a leisure activity for Johann. In 1928 he observed a pretty young girl bathing in the Muschwager Pond, and a pattern of criminal acts emerged. He followed the girl, pulled her off her bike, and tried to rape her. The girl managed to escape, and so did her attacker. From 1931, Eichhorn committed numerous sexual crimes, of which his sisters were also victims. In 1935 there was hope that he would change his ways. That was the year that Johann met his second wife, Josefa, and fathered 2 children with her. But even his family couldn't guess which face was really hidden behind the good husband and caring father. Despite being married, he continued to attack women, but no fatalities were recorded during this period. According to Eichhorn, this was because his wife loved the violent sex they had, allowing him to keep his urges under control. At any time, whether in a raging storm, deep snow or sunshine, middle of the night or in broad daylight, Johann Eichhorn was always ready for the opportunity to attack an unsuspecting female. He attacked young women in and around Western Munich, threatening them with either a pistol or a knife, before he beat, raped and sometimes robbed them. Usually the rape itself was enough for Eichhorn, but the more a victim struggled, the more dark urges overwhelmed him.
Durch Freude schickte mir ins Bayernland, wo ich Freude an der Kraft von Emil fand. Emil hat an mir ne Freude, na und kräftig sind wir beide. Louis Hochzeit, eine wäre doch Kraft. Kraft!
rang out from the marquee. It was October the 11th, 1931, and the last Oktoberfest weekend for that year was already in full swing. The festival was well attended, the atmosphere was relaxed, and the people were happy. Even then, Munich's Theresienwiese was an attractive location for tourists, partygoers, and Munich families. 16-year-old Katharina Schätzl was among the happy crowds. It was in the afternoon when she met him. He seemed like a charming young man, someone her parents would approve of. They enjoyed easy conversation and strolled across the meadow away from the crowds. He suggested they go for a walk, and afterwards he would make sure she got home safely. She thought it sounded like fun, so they jumped on their bikes and rode to Isar Valley Station. From there they cycled towards Ebenhausen. Once there, they strolled along the Isar River, talked and enjoyed the beautiful afternoon. After they became more familiar with each other, they sat on a bench. He held her hand and gave her a tentative kiss. Kathy liked it, so they continued to cuddle for a while. But suddenly he started choking her, and she realized the terrible danger she was in. I had cuddled with her, but I felt no attraction or arousal. So I took her throat and squeezed it shut. I felt a tickling sensation, grabbed her by the throat, threw her to the ground, and the more she resisted, the more excitement I felt. After killing his Oktoberfest companion, he threw her body into the river. Her body later washed up in the Großhessel-Loher Wehr. She was his first, but unfortunately not his last victim. On a sunny Wednesday, May the 30th, 1934, 26-year-old Anna Geltel was on her way to her favourite spot in Forstenrieder Park. The Raspberry Place, as she called it, was perfect for sunbathing. Unfortunately, there was someone else lurking in the forest who was not there for sunbathing. She was on the bike path making her way through the park when he saw her. He was cycling in the opposite direction, and as she approached on her bike, the mere sight of Anna was enough for him to immediately turn his bike around and follow her. He quickly caught up with her, grabbed her from behind and yanked her off the bike. She thrashed out and tried to fight back. He easily overpowered her. After violently assaulting her, he mutilated her genitalia with an 18-centimeter knife. To hide Anna's lifeless and battered body, he buried it under leaves and earth. Her body was never found. He never revealed the exact location of her grave. The police only found Anna's bike at the hydroelectric power station, Isarwerk 1. I don't have to talk if I don't want to, Johann Eichhorn said to his fellow prisoner. On Saturday, September the 8th, 1934, Berta Sauerbeck spent the evening with her best friend and a few other colleagues in the Wartburg, a pub on Auenstrasse. As the night drew to a close, Berta took the tram home. It was a familiar route and she often travelled home alone at night. She never had any reason to fear. It was not very far from the Milbertshofen tram station on her bike to her home. Despite her confidence and fearless attitude, she never saw the attack coming and could not escape him. He dragged her off the bike and viciously assaulted her. She fiercely resisted his attack, which he enjoyed for a while, but it annoyed him at the same time, so he shot her in the back of the head with his pistol. After brutalizing her, he buried the alive but severely injured woman under a garbage pit, where she subsequently died. A cool breeze blew on the late summer night of August the 31st, 1937. Rosa Eigerlein rode on her bike along the road from Gemering to Puchheim. Rosa worked as a seamstress in a small workshop in Munich. She was a thin woman, but with a strength that belied her stature, so she wasn't afraid of going home alone in the dark. If someone grabbed her, she would just fight back. Johann Eichhorn was also travelling in the same direction when he made a quick stop to urinate behind a tree. He had just buttoned his trousers when he saw a pretty woman on a bicycle, illuminated in the headlights of a passing milk truck. Something squirming and dark awakened in him again. With his usual modus operandi, he grabbed his bike, stalked the young woman, and dragged her off her bike. After her murder, and crazed with bloodlust, Eichhorn fled into the field towards Lockhausen. In the station bar in Lockhausen, he drank a large beer to calm his nerves. On the way there he had met 2 police officers, but both were unaware at the time that a murder had been committed. "If they had known where I came from, then good night," Johann Eichhorn laughingly told his fellow prisoner while in custody after his capture. Marie Jörg was a level-headed but sometimes unpredictable young woman. She had left for Munich on her own to look for a job there, and hadn't been heard from in about 4 weeks. She had been missing since September the 29th, 1938. The police didn't seem concerned. Munich was a big city. They assumed she'd return after her money ran out. In the summer of 1938, Marie had spent 3 weeks with her mother in Unterrelig. But then she wanted to go to Munich again, because she had heard there were plenty of positions to be found as a maid. Therefore, on September the 28th, she travelled to her uncle's in Buchingen near Füssen. There she spent the night and continued on the next day towards Munich. She cycled on through Forstenrieder Park. It was not far now, and she would soon arrive in Munich. But while she was cycling with concentration and determination, Marie did not notice that behind her someone was cycling with even more determination towards her. She met with the same fate as Rosa Eigelein, with him mutilating her genitalia post-mortem and leaving the body in the woods not far from the road. It was only by chance that Marie's body was discovered by two walkers. Otherwise, like Anna, she may never have been found. On the 24th of April 1939, her badly decomposed body was discovered 80 meters away from the Oberdil Forester's Lodge. The scene of the crime is not far from the site of his first murder, Katharina Schätzl, 7 years earlier. On January the 29th, 1939, during a carnival parade, Eichhorn tried to attack a 12-year-old girl. This time, however, there were many people around, and passers-by spotted the crime and held him until the police arrived. After his arrest, Eichhorn is examined by doctors and psychologists. The 1.73-meter tall man is slim and strong. According to police records, he has large hands and a large mouth that is missing several teeth, despite his relatively young age. The remaining ones are heavily discolored, some even black. Otherwise, they determine he is physically inconspicuous.
Marschmusik. Auf Wiedersehen bei der nächsten Sendung. Heil Hitler!
According to the expert opinion, Eichhorn was an intellectually not below average person, but he is an ethically, morally low-ranking, baseless, weak-willed, sexually extraordinarily compulsive psychopath. When asked why only 5 of his numerous rape victims were killed, Eichhorn replied that he shot them instinctively only if they resisted fiercely, as he had no idea what else to do in that situation, and they could be fully his once they were dead. By the end of November 1939, a death sentence looms. Eichhorn writes a farewell letter to his wife and 2 children from prison. After committing grave wrongs, I have also to reckon with terrible consequences. I myself expressed my wish not to see you again. On December the 1st, 1939, Eichhorn was beheaded by guillotine at the Stadelheim prison, aged 33. His wife and sons are given new names and leave Orbing. My dear friends, I was just about to say, I hope you enjoyed the presentation, but it's not really something you can enjoy, I guess, in the sense of entertainment, but it is an interesting insight into the aberrations of the human psyche, which I know that a lot of my viewers find very interesting. Now, it has been said by certain researchers that him being a member of the Nazi Party helped him to elude the law for so long. I'm not sure about that. I mean, it's possible, but detective work back then was very primitive. As I've mentioned before in other cases from those times, they just didn't have the technology to be able to trace offenders unless they were caught in the act, as he was at the end. He was an opportunist, and they are the most difficult to find. He waited sometimes years before an opportunity turned up where he could attack the woman in an isolated area. And I urge mothers to warn their daughters today that there are always amongst humanity these opportunist criminals, and they are always looking for a young woman or young women to be in a situation where they are isolated away from the crowds. So, always be aware, have that sort of sense of your personal space around you, because these guys, I say that they'll go for years, but if they find a situation where they really think that they will not be caught, they will do it. They will do it. And there's so many cases like this, and they are, even to this day, the hardest to detect, even with the technology, because if their DNA is not in the database, how are they going to find them? It's interesting that he was always so careful about committing his crimes in isolated areas. But the last one, what happened there? Did he subconsciously want to get caught? To be actually in the middle of the city amongst people and attack a young girl? It's really weird why he would break his modus operandi on that occasion. And by the way, the Nazi Party were very strict on sex crimes from their own members and soldiers. So this is a site called Muse.com, and it's about sex crimes under the Wehrmacht. And you can see here in this groundbreaking work, David Raub Schneider offers a nuanced investigation into the German army's prosecution and punishment of sex offenders during the Second World War. Blah, blah, blah. Let's get down. So, in many cases, the Wehrmacht's response to rape, sexual assault, homosexual offences, child molestation, incest, racial defilement, and bestiality often depended on the willingness of the offender to continue to bear arms for his country, which is interesting. So they're saying that if you are showing yourself as a loyal supporter of the Nazi Party and the Third Reich, it's possible you could get off. And of course there was war crimes committed by German officers in Russia and within Germany itself, just like the Russians committed sexual crimes against the German women. There's always sex crimes during war if one country is invading another. The actual law was quite strict with these people, and I read on another site they would be castrated, if convicted of sex crimes. So it says here the Wehrmacht system functioned as a filtering mechanism that rechanneled willing soldiers back to the front, while simultaneously channeling recalcitrant or incorrigible soldiers in the opposite direction to concentration camps for destruction through work at the hands of the SS. So an interesting insight into how the Wehrmacht viewed sex crimes. I don't think this guy would have been let off by the Wehrmacht. He was targeting German women. That would have definitely been frowned upon. I personally think they just didn't catch him because they just didn't know who to look for. And regarding his sadism, the act of violence against a female is one thing, but the mutilation of the genitals, what was he doing there? That was obviously a hatred of women. Did something happen to him in his childhood from his mother or from a older female? what would have caused this mutilation. He obviously felt sexually inferior, and I think he got probably the best satisfaction when they were incapacitated or actually unconscious or even dead. So that just shows his nature. And this is going to definitely get demonetized by YouTube once it gets there. My goodness. This is the BBC.com website, and this article or page is titled The Rape of Berlin. I'm not going to read right through it, but it's basically about Russia's role in the defeat of Nazi Germany, World War II, blah, blah, blah. But there is another story of mass rapes by Soviet soldiers of German women in the dying days of the war. Some viewers may find this story disturbing, which is why I'm not going to read it all out, but I will leave the link in the description. It says here the Russian media regularly dismiss talks of the rapes as Western myth, though one of the many sources that tell the story of what happened is a diary kept by a young Soviet officer. I did meet an very old German lady here. We became good friends, and she told me about some of these atrocities were committed by American and English soldiers. So obviously the American and English soldiers to a much lesser percentage than the Russians, but war crimes happen all the time, everywhere, to this day, wherever there are invading forces into another country. And just to give you some perspective, this lady always voiced a hatred for the Nazis. So she told me that her father actually had to get her out of the country because as a teenager she was very vocal of her distaste, bordering on hatred for the Nazis, which she has to this day. She's a tiny little woman, but full of energy, a very dominant personality. I met her years ago. She came to my business and has been coming quite often. She's actually going to leave me a painting in her will, a beautiful painting. So kind of, I didn't ask for it. She just knew that I admired it and wants me to have it. But, it's people like that that make you realize that everybody is the same around the world. There's always going to be haters, but most of us want to live in peace and in harmony with each other and are not interested in the war and power games of the elite, but they just keep pushing it at us. It does say in this article that the Russians, their reason for this, they say, was they were avenging the attacks and rapes and murders of Russian women when the Germans were invading Russia, which happened as well. So there's no doubt these atrocities happened on both sides. When I came to Switzerland over 20 years ago, I opened my business quite early on, ridiculously early. It was about 9 months after arriving here, and bearing in mind that I knew no German, so I had to do an intensive German course, and it really was very basic at the start, so I had a lot of difficulty understanding, particularly the Swiss German, who speak with the Swiss dialect, which even the Germans can't understand. So you can imagine my difficulties. But anyway, right at the start there, just right at the start, I remember this stout, short old man with a great cannonball head, huge head he had. It didn't seem to have any neck. He started coming to my business. He brought me some work, and after that he would just appear from time to time without any work, and he just came for a coffee and wanted to talk. And because he spoke High German, I found that easier to understand. Now, I don't know why he brought this subject up. Probably he felt that I was an open personality and liked listening to stories of the past. But I wasn't prepared for what he was going to tell me. One day, he revealed that he had been a soldier during World War II, for the Germans, obviously, and that he was a tank driver, and that they had went into Russia. And he said that always there would be 3 soldiers inside of the tank at all times. And he said it was really horrible. He said not only was it claustrophobic, but also smelly and filled with petrol fumes. Just a horrible, horrible thing. And he goes, their rules were that if one of them had to leave the tank to relieve himself, then the other fellow soldiers had to accompany him at all times. You couldn't go alone because of the obvious dangers. Now, my memory may fail me after all these years as to the exact number in the tank. I think it was 3. And I think he also said that they did have a pot that they could use as a toilet in situations where they couldn't get out of the tank, but they did prefer to get out so that the others didn't have to witness it or smell anything afterwards. Anyway, they were driving through the Russian countryside in this tank, and one of the soldiers inside the tank, declared his need to relieve himself. So he said, "I'm all right." He goes, "I'll be fine. There's an abandoned farmhouse. I'll just go quickly behind the wall there." And so he had done it before. They didn't see such a problem. So off he went, and about a few minutes later, they heard the report of a gun a few times, like bang, bang. And they quickly rushed out, and they saw 2 women running into the house. They thought the house had been abandoned, but there was apparently had been these 2 Russian women hiding there, and they saw this German soldier alone and decided to shoot him, possibly out of fear. They thought maybe he was going to come in to the house. Anyway, this little old German man, I'm positive he doesn't live anymore. This was, I would say, over 20 years ago. He told me that him and his other colleague decided on the spur of the moment to bulldoze the house with those women in it. And I said, "What do you think, that they died?" He went, "Oh yes, undoubtedly." But he goes, this was war. This was war, and he goes, "This is the horrible things we did against fellow humans." He goes, "It's unthinkable now, today, but in those times, this is just something we did. We didn't go in and hunt these women down, but we just demolished the whole house. There was nothing left of it." So I was gobsmacked. I'd never met in my life a German soldier before, or an ex-German soldier. So it was quite a shock, as you can imagine. I've never told this story. I do remember him telling me that when they were actually in a combat situation, he was terrified every moment, not knowing whether the next minute would be the end. He goes, that was for the whole tour. It was an absolutely terrifying experience for him. So all of these soldiers fighting the elite power games, they're just normal people, They don't really want to be there. They're not even sure what's going on, most of them. Just terrified and just want to be back home with their families. And I also met, and I think he has passed away. I haven't seen him. He was a victim of the Nazis. He was an old Jewish man who lived to 100. He may be still... Oh, the cat's going. Yo, wait. You have to wait, darling. Yeah, so he was... Okay, you'd have to pause this. I have to remove the cat from my studio. I'm back. Yeah, I don't bother editing it out nowadays. You guys know the cat now. She's been in a few of my episodes. She's just a little bit old and doddery, so I've just went and given her some fresh food. She likes fresh food. If it gets like a day old or something, or it's been out for half an hour on the plate, she's not eating it. So she has become very fussy. But we cater to her, so she's happy now. Anyway, where was I? Yes, so this old Jewish man, he'd suddenly disappeared from the neighborhood here about a year and a half ago. I have no idea. I never knew his family. He had a daughter living in Paris. But as I say, he was 100 years old. The guy was amazing. Anyway, he would come to my shop for coffees as well. Luckily, not during the same time as the German soldier. He didn't like the Germans. But I must attract old people. They know I have a friendly ear, and they can talk to me. And I like listening. They got so much. I love hearing about the past directly from the person who was there. Anyway, he was born in Vienna, Austria, and he remembers his father wearing, those top hats, cylinder hood, they call them here, top hats, and the beautiful coffee houses in Vienna. And the father would go every morning to read the newspapers and other periodicals. So anyway, his father, during the Nazi occupation of Austria, his father was rounded up along with him. He was just a teenager then. And the father was arrested for being a Freemason. The father was actually from Spanish origin. It's quite complicated. And they just narrowly escaped the concentration camps. But that's another story for another time. He was saying that the Nazis were sometimes not cruel in the manner you would expect, but he goes, he remembers having to draw swastikas. Oh, the cat's going again. I have to lock the door, hang on. Anyway, I've just given her a 10-minute brush and then put her in her nest. She should be content now, but as a precaution, I've shut the door this time. So where was I? Yeah, so he was made by these German soldiers to draw swastikas on the pavement in chalk, and then he had to rub them out again and do them again. He said this was a demoralizing act, and they did this with a lot of the Jewish Austrian citizens. He survived. Him and his father escaped. They were put in prison. They escaped and fled over to, I think it was to England, and then from England to Switzerland, and where he had lived ever since. And he was receiving compensation from the Austrian government right up until the end. So I guess they didn't expect he would live so long. So yeah, so I've had some interesting old chaps in my business. Anyway, I want to show you, it's time for show and tell. This very interesting article, and before I show you it, I love miniature items, as I showed you in the Branwell Bronte episode last, the miniature atlas. I love anything miniature that's well made. It has to be antique or at the very least vintage, and I love it. And particularly well made stuff, but even folk art, and which this falls under that category. Have a look at this. So several years ago, must be probably about 13 years ago, I was buying stuff online at an online auction site, and there was one particular seller I would always buy from. He had quite a large premises where he sold antiques and vintage items on consignment. It doesn't exist anymore. He gave it up years ago, but it was nearly towards the end where I saw he had this, and at the time I had no idea really what it was. I thought it might be folk art, that someone had created a gramophone or a miniature gramophone for a doll's house. And I thought, well, that is quirky. It's not something you see every day. So I went there because I had purchased some other items or bid for them and won them at this auction. I would always go and pick the stuff up myself. So whenever I went there, and it wasn't until he put it in my hand that I realized that the cutout for the speaker is a stylized swastika. I didn't realize that when I was buying it, quite honestly. And the seller was quite amazed too when I pointed that out. He hadn't noticed it either. Anyway, I didn't have a good look at it. I just got my items and, paid and went on my way. And still assuming that it was for a doll's house. It's quite crudely made, but I like that sort of thing, that someone has went to this effort of carving this thing from hand and using bits and bobs. You can see the actual dial there is probably from a gramophone, a small or something else, a small radio. These were designed the Volksempfänger, which basically means the people's receiver. They were quite common in Germany. It wasn't until I looked at the back, and you can see it here, when I realized it's got some little workings in it. And I just want to state most categorically, I am in no way a Nazi fan. I'm not a neo-Nazi. I deplore the atrocities they committed, and I've actually made a few videos about that. I'll point them out in a minute in case any of you viewers haven't seen them, because one of them is coming to YouTube this weekend. Nothing to do with Nazis, against it totally. Let me just explain this. So when I opened the back, I thought, well, that looks intriguing, because it certainly looks like there's rhyme and reason to whatever's behind there. Now, I'm no radio expert. Anyway, I just put it away. I thought, well, that's a very strange item. I've never come across anything like that. And some months later, I sold a real gramophone online, and the gentleman came to pick it up. And I showed him this, and he said, I know a valve radio expert in Italy. I'll give you his email address. He speaks English. You can send him pictures. He might be able to tell you something about that. So I did that, and this kind gentleman in Italy wrote back. I sent him detailed pictures, wrote back and said that it actually would have worked. This would have received one radio station, no doubt the Nazi party broadcast from their station. It would have actually worked. I was like totally astounded when he wrote that. I was like, that is incredible. So obviously the backstory we will never know, but can we surmise that this is actually trench art? That this soldier cobbled this together with the stylized swastika on the front, and he was listening to broadcasts from the Nazi Party? I don't know. Was he homesick? Was he stationed somewhere? Apparently you had to pay a radio license to listen to the Nazi Party broadcast. Was it a way to escape that? I really have no idea. Other than that, this Italian expert said that it would have worked. Amazing. In the back there's a little bit of cardboard separating the initial components from the front, where I guess the speaker would be. I don't want to take it out. The cardboard is fixed in place or glued or something, but I just got Odette to put her tiny little finger over the edge and she can feel something. So it's quite possibly a speaker at the front. I'm guessing it would be. Oh, wow. I am going to keep this because to me, it's not glorifying Nazis at all. It's just the same. But just say that you were a fan of Biden or Trump, and then you found out years later that they ate babies for breakfast, but you had created a wonderful statue or some work of art in their honor. It doesn't diminish the work of art when you find out afterwards they were monsters. And I would say this guy had no idea about the Nazi atrocities when he made this. He was just a soldier, supporting a very popular political party at the time. As the old German guy, the old German tank driver, he had no idea of the atrocities either. He told me that. He had no idea. So not all Germans, most of the Germans didn't know about this. So I don't see this as glorifying Nazis. To me, it's someone's homesickness. That's what I see. It's trench art, and I find it, just as equally fascinating as English or American trench art. So wow, what do you think of that? What do you think of that? Isn't that incredible? Have you ever seen anything like that before? Because I certainly haven't. Anyway, my friends, I have rambled rather a lot during this episode. I did intend to make the ramble a bit longer because content-wise, the actual story, there wasn't a great deal to it and there wasn't many factual images. I've done the best I can. Sorry if I have rambled too much for some of you. I know some of you do like my rambling. I am going to cut it off now. I'm closing up. I'm shutting down. I would love to know your thoughts on everything that I have talked about today or tonight, wherever you are. I said during the presentation that this video will be presented this weekend on YouTube. It's actually last weekend by the time you guys watch this video. Alternatively, if you are on the right pledge/tier here on Patreon, you can watch it here without any ads in very good quality. Just a reminder about another video in the same vein, Francesca Mann, the Jewish heroine, which is also very interesting, which YouTube demonetized and I believe restricted, and they made sure it didn't get many views at all. God knows why. Please go and watch it if you haven't seen it and tell me why they would do that. I think I know why they did that. Probably my comments at the end about the government could have been that. No doubt. Anyway.
This is Audible, your fortnightly radio host, bidding you good night. And until next time, God bless. God bless. God bless.